This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogmen, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything is good over here. I know by the time you see and or hear this episode, we will be in the new year. So even though technically it's still 2023, I do want to wish everybody a happy new year. All right. We are basically in the home stretch of 2023. So, I've talked about it. Everybody's when they do their New Year's resolution, I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do that, or, and this is like the last hurrah, especially if you're doing something like whether it's diet, whatever, And like I said, I'll probably put out a separate, I know I promised last year, but I'm going to do it this year with a hypnosis as far as New Year's resolution and, why your subconscious mind kind of like does a number on you. And that's why people kind of like crash and burn, like by February, March, April, May, depending on your timeline. And we'll talk about how that New Year resolution is like a loaded word. And because the New Year's resolution, you might have family members or coworkers who are like, yeah, I made this New Year's resolution. So when you all kind of crash and burn, you've got company and you don't feel so bad. And it's like a little bit of a setup as to the timing, but it is what it is. But like I said, I'll do a separate show on that by myself. I don't think it's going to be a live stream, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. And everybody asks me, what are you going to do? Well, when your kids are grown and you're not tied into, how can I say, the Christmas thing, and everybody does their thing. And then New Year's the same thing. You do like what we're going to do on the 28th, right in between. We're going to go see Maroon 5. We're going to go to a concert, which is great, by the way. That's how it's like, okay, we're going to hang out at home for Christmas. I've got a couple of people, very small, coming over to eat. And then New Year's, forget it. We realize sometimes it's too crazy out there for New Year's Eve. And we've got dogs. And, when people, even though we're out in the middle of nowhere, when people shoot off fireworks, the dogs, even though my dogs are pretty calm, it does wig them out. So we're like, nah, we'll stay indoors or at least stay home. And for New Year's, but in between, you got to have fun, you know how they ring in the new year kind of deal. Yeah. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that. And by the way, I always make my commentaries about the weather. I'm going to put in my 2 cents worth about the weather. I'm in North Florida. It's gotten cold. It's dropped into the 30s. But, and remember, I grew up in South Florida, which we always had the threat of a hurricane, whatever. So how's this? I don't wig out easy. Last week, as a matter of fact, I had plans for the weekends. I had things that I need to take care of. I had to drive a bit. I get an alert from my local. I mean, I knew that there was supposed to be like raining, but I was like, okay, big deal. Rain is rain, right? But I get an email from my power company, which shall remain unnamed, saying, like, we don't worry. You might have power down and we've got crews out there. And I'm thinking, man, wait, maybe this is worse than I thought. I rescheduled what I was going to do on the weekend because in other words, I got fooled. So I'm thinking, okay. And, and if anything, I want to be here and, All it was a lot of rain. It rained. It rained for like maybe 24 hours, like from half day to the next day, like 24 hours. And they were like flooding and I was like, "Wait a minute. This is just rain." No wind. I was expecting high winds. No winds, gusts, and I was like, "Man, if your power company is setting you an alert, watch out. Things are going to happen." I'm telling you. When you're a little bit older and you've gone through things, it's like everything now is over the top. Like before, this would never, you would much less get an email or a notice from your power company, your electric company that, hey, severe weather. Because, you can have your weather channel say, well, severe weather, but when your electric company sends you something, you're like, oh my God. Anyway, my 2 cents worth in that. Let me tell you, it's like, they get carried away sometimes with this stuff. And like I said, I grew up where the threat of really, truly bad weather would be a problem. And it was never like this. Back then, as a matter of fact, I'm going to age myself. Back then, it was as long as you had a transistor radio with batteries and you had hurricane lamps, you were good to go. Just dealt with it as it came along. But of course, yes, another place, another time. So anyway, let's get on to the good part. The good part is the guest today at Stories of the Supernatural. Her name is Pat O'Connell. This is the first time she's been on the show. She's a writer and researcher who's worked in the technology and aerospace industries for over 30 years. In the latter half, she shared the true story of Clay Wheeler, a Texas aircraft repair shop owner who witnessed an array of paranormal phenomena at a small airport where he lived that included UFOs, aliens, poltergeists, demonic possession, and plain old murder. She fictionalized Wheeler's location because he had allegedly shot and buried an alien and possibly rigged explosives at the burial site. Wheeler's experiences began in 2010 when he started playing laser tag with lights in the sky, and this seemed to draw UFOs into his airspace, including a Mexican hat-type craft that hovered on the runway and an oblong-shaped ship. One night in his living room, Wheeler described seeing what looked like a blue plasma angel, and then a demonic energy came up from the ground and attacked the angel in a kind of play of good versus evil, as recounted by Pat. Or I don't know if it was Pat, but we'll find out, or by this person. Another time, he reportedly saw two grays and a third alien that had a tall, featureless body like a candle and a huge head. It may have been a bodyguard for the other two. Wheeler became concerned for his safety. O'Connell detailed as he witnessed one of the aliens at the airport with a beam weapon vaporizing anything in its path, including corrugated steel. On an occasion after that, he shot one of the aliens and it outgassed possibly toxic liquids and fumes, so he left the area. But when he came back, the alien was gone. Later, he shot another one in his shop, and this was the body he buried. One night, Wheeler saw a portal open up. O'Connell continued, and various craft came along with strange creatures like a wolf walking on its hind legs. Oh boy, where do I begin? Help me welcome her. How are you doing, Pat?
I'm doing great, Marlene. How are you?
Great. Let me tell you, you were had been involved obviously in the UFO, your ufology field before you met this gentleman. And,
More or less, not as much as my brother was.
okay. Is that why he got in touch with you, or how was it that you both got together as far as
Well,
telling you
my
about his encounter?
yeah, my brother Jim O'Connell, had been abducted. He believes since he was a kid,
Okay.
um, and um, and it was hard for him coming to that realization, but eventually he accepted that that was what was really happening to him. And so he was developing a TV reality show. He had been working on this for, I don't know, 10 years or something.
Okay.
Uh, and he wanted to tell the stories of the experiencers, the people who had been abducted. And it
Okay.
didn't matter to him whether or not it was objectively real or some psychological
Right. It was just their
phenomenon.
experience of it. Exactly.
He wanted to respect them because he knew that
Sure.
that these experiences could ruin your life or at least
Yes.
really complicate your lives.
True.
And so his idea was to do the stories of these people, to give them some acknowledgement and credibility that they hadn't had before. And of course, there were a lot of people, you know, he was trying to pitch this show to various production companies and investors. And in a lot of cases, they didn't understand the difference between a show about UFOs and
Mhm.
about the experiencers. And he, you know, he would pull out his hair, because it was like, if somebody famous came to your door, you wouldn't say, "Oh yeah, it's nice to see you, King Charles. I want to go see what you drove up in." You know, you're not going to go look
Exactly.
for the vehicle. And so, you know, it was one of his pet peeves that people didn't understand that this wasn't about UFOs. It didn't matter about the UFOs. It was about the experience, and it really didn't even matter if that experience was real in
Right.
a in an objective sense. It was real to the people who
Sure.
had those experiences.
Yep.
And so, you know, he had had his own, and in fact, it took him a long time to acknowledge for himself that that's what was happening to him. You know, he thought he was just having these weird dreams, these really vivid dreams
But
for
what
the
happened?
longest
This
time.
was as an adult that he started to have these dreams where
Yeah, it was as an adult, but once he acknowledged that they might not be dreams,
Mhm.
um, then he started looking back into his childhood. When he was a kid, he and
Okay.
I had two younger brothers, Jim and Terry, and they saw a UFO over the grocery store, like two houses down from our house. And so that's where he could put a marker on the timeline there for him.
Okay.
But later on, we were talking about the 1965 uh, Northeast blackout. We were in Connecticut at the time, and
Mhm.
we lived in a 230-year-old house, 270-year-old house,
Wow.
fantastic, amazing house that had all these giant fireplaces you could practically stand up in. And so he reminded me, we were talking about the blackout, and you know, we were roasting marshmallows over the fire, and listening to the news on on the transistor radio, as you talked about,
Mhm.
and we're playing Mad Libs. But he reminded me that one of our friends, the my older brother and I, were in high school, and one of our high school friends showed up, and he was saying he had seen a UFO on his way over. And so I
Okay.
said to Jim, "Okay, so are you telling me that your experiences started with that night?" And he said, "No, no, I didn't see that." But he said when he started thinking back to other things that had happened in his life, because he knew, for example, from Whitley Strieber's books, that
Mhm.
a lot of times once you realize that you've been abducted, you can track back to things in your past. And so he looked back to a situation when he thinks he was about 8, I think he said.
Mhm.
And he said it was Thanksgiving, or around Thanksgiving, and my mom needed some kind of spice for the pies or the stuffing or something, and so she sent him over to the store. Now it's two houses down, and he was gone for hours and hours. And he said all he remembers is riding his bicycle around the back of the store where they threw their boxes out. And in those days, they didn't flatten them. You know, they would just
Right.
throw the boxes out, and he would play in the boxes. I mean, you know, he's a
Yeah, it's
boy.
a kid. It's a kid. It's a
Yeah.
kid.
But he said that then, you know, several hours later, he comes back home, and he doesn't have what he was sent to the store for, and he doesn't
Mhm.
know what happened during that period of time. So
Wow.
he doesn't necessarily remember any encounter during that period, but he has missing time. So,
Okay.
you know, that's one of the hallmarks of
Yes.
some of these, you know, abduction stories.
Mhm. Yes. And did your other siblings or did you have experiences? You know, how sometimes, and it's incredible, as children that you have things going on and it's not till later that you all realize you were having some type of
Well,
experience?
I I don't think I did, but I would be open to doing hypnosis to see, you
Okay.
know, if there's anything hidden. I mean, I've done past life regression, so
Right.
you know, I wouldn't be afraid to. I might regret it, but you
Well,
know,
you know
I,
what? There's something that people don't realize that there's age regression, you know,
right,
which is not past life.
right.
As a matter of fact, a lot of hypnotists, okay, you guys, which have gone into past lives, started doing an age regression with their client. and
Mhm.
it just kept going, and all of a sudden this person's describing, but they start out with age regression. And
Right.
normally in my experience, um, and I know that a lot of abductees or contactees will claim that that something was done to them to like fade the memory, in other words.
Right.
But also in my experience, especially when you're a child, that trauma, um, in other words, you forget it in order to cope. How's that? To stay sane. In
Right,
other words,
which is why I say I may regret it if I were to
right.
do a hypnotic
And normally
regression.
you know what? Some people say, I've spoken to hypnotists that have done recovered memories for abductees. And it's, how can I say, you got to look at it on an individual basis. There's people that on their own, when they get older, it'll start by weird dreams, vivid dreams. That's
Mhm.
basically the memory coming forward because your mind realizes now you can handle it. Now you're
Right.
okay. Yeah. There's people that really, they could spend their whole lifetime and they will never really be able to deal with that.
Yeah.
Everybody's an individual case. In other
Yeah.
words, just it's better that you don't remember. Depends on the
Yeah.
personality and what exactly happened. So,
Yeah. Yeah, so I'd be open to that. I just but Jim, once he started having those uh dreams, they were pretty clear, and then he started having experiences that he knew were not dreams.
okay.
He was on ships. He remembers that. And he didn't have to have any any kind of hypnosis or anything.
Let
And
me
in
ask you
fact,
something. Were you all living in the same place when all of this happened? Like from childhood into those years?
no,
Okay.
it started at that house,
Uh-huh.
and then our family moved to Texas,
Okay. Wow.
and
Okay. So
that's
across the country. Okay.
yeah. And then Jim eventually moved. He got married and moved back up to Connecticut because we loved Connecticut so
Okay.
much, and we loved that house too. I mean, it was just amazing. Um, and so we were really lucky to have had that experience of living in that house. But no, he once he started, um, he was actually back in Connecticut when he started remembering the
Yeah.
experiences,
Okay.
and so so he was trying to develop this TV show so that other people could process what had happened to
Yes.
them, and he knew he was still processing it, and he knew he still was not sure it was real. I mean, if you read any of Whitley Strieber's books, he's like the most famous abductee, and to this day he'll say, I don't know if I was literally abducted by literal aliens from another planet.
Mm-hmm.
He's open
Right.
to the possibility that it could be anything. It could be psychological, or it could be uh, interdimensional, or it could be
Sure.
bleed through from the past, or who knows? I mean,
Right.
it's just extraordinary
Well,
what
you know
happened.
what it is also, and you mentioned it right at the beginning. A lot of these shows having to do with UFOs and everything, basically the people they roll out most of the time are experts. How's that? So, and what you said, the regular person that's had this experience, like you said, your perception is your reality.
Right,
Whether it was an actual, you don't really see that much of that type of shows where we're just talking to ordinary people that have this experience. Usually they'll
right,
have like a physicist or an astronomer and, this guy and that guy and, an expert, but very few really get what you were telling me your brother wanted to do, which was the ordinary person
right.
describing maybe a one-time encounter. Maybe that was it, or
Or multiples. Yeah,
multiple systemic from childhood all the way through through adulthood.
yeah.
You don't see that often. And it's surprising. It's like, the experts want to muscle the ordinary people, the normies out of the way. Get out.
I
This is
know, and these people want to be heard. I mean,
yes.
some of them don't want to be made public. Some of them just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be heard by him.
Yes.
By another person who didn't say they were crazy.
Yes.
And they wanted to, it's like therapy. They wanted to tell their story. And one of the things that Jim and I went back and forth on is that with Clay Wheeler, the main character in the story
Mm-hmm.
that I wrote about,
Right.
is that he had a lot of quote unquote evidence, photos, and a few videos, but I wasn't impressed by those. And people ask me, I'm a skeptic,
Mhm.
but I'm open-minded. And so they'll ask me about this evidence, and I'm like, um, I wanted by the time we finished interviewing, I mean, we met with Clay multiple times, and I interviewed him so many times, and um, but I want after a while, I wanted him to stop showing me these photos. They weren't that great. There were a few that are really interesting, and there some of them are in the book, some of them are on the website. But um, I felt that the story that he told about his experiences that he didn't get pictures of, like when this big ship hovered over the runway, or when this one oblong craft was so low he could touch it. These were the stories that were so compelling to me, and he had no proof for those, no proof at
Right.
all. And yet i I tended to believe him as a skeptic. Now, do I think that there's a possibility that he was making things up or was hallucinating or who knows what, misinterpreting something? How do you misinterpret, you
I was gonna
know?
say, it's like, sometimes people will say something and you mistake something, "Hey, you think it's Bigfoot, but it's a bear." I'm just saying,
Right,
but when you're talking about, I've got a craft hovering,
right.
it's like,
A ship, a ship
what
the
else
size,
could it be but?
right, a ship the size of a UPS truck
Right.
hovering over your head so low you can touch it with your hand.
What was the triggering event? What happened? What was the initial thing where this started happening?
Okay, well, so you have to understand that Clay lived and worked at this little tiny airport in the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
So this is rural. It's a runway, no, no tower, no services or anything. He owned a
Mhm.
hangar building. So he had on one end it was the hangar, in the middle was a shop, and then he built a an apartment on the other end, so he and his wife could live in that while they were building a house on some property nearby. So he was living on this property and working on the property, and none of this had happened until 2010. But he had been living and working there for, I don't know, at least another 10 years, maybe 15 years before that.
Okay.
And so nothing had happened before then. But it was 2010, and it lasted through the early part of 2013, and then he had to move away. But the first thing that really happened was that there was some people who drove out to the airport late at night, and you could come on to the airport anytime. And there was a
Mhm.
gate, but it wasn't locked. So they came out because they had seen a light in the sky that was behaving in a way that didn't seem normal, and they
Okay.
wanted to follow it. So it seemed to be going over that way. So they came out to the airport where they'd get a lot of good wide open spaces to see it. And so he heard people outside, and he came out and, what's going on? And they told him. And so he started looking at this light, and he said it looked like, to him, it looked like it was spinning. Whatever it was spinning. And he thought, well, maybe that's just an optical illusion. Maybe it's just Venus, whatever. It was in the wrong place for Venus. But he said, then I realized, I started watching it with him. And he said, I realized that I could follow its movement. And so he got in his truck and he started following it to the other side of town. There was a small town nearby. And that
Okay.
was that was really the first encounter with something, but before that he hadn't even thought about UFOs. Now, understand that he's repairing airplanes.
Yes.
And and he was also a flight instructor, and a pilot. So when you're in that field, you don't talk about UFOs. That can
Oh,
be
no. Oh,
that yeah,
no.
that can be a career killer.
Absolutely, yes.
So some time passed, and then he was out taking pictures of a plane. It was out on the tarmac on the taxiway. uh, they had done some repairs, and he needed to take some pictures of the underside of a wing to send to the client's insurance company to prove that the repairs had been done or whatever. So he shoots all these pictures and then he goes into his computer and he starts looking at the pictures on the computer and he sees that he said it was like a defect in the film, but he was
Okay.
using he was using a digital camera. So he knew this couldn't be like a defect in
Mhm.
literal film. Uh,
Yes.
and so, he looked at it closer and he said it looked like a pork pie hat. It was like a silvery pork pie hat. And it showed up in multiple frames, but not in the same place. So if it was a speck of dust on the lens, it would
It
have been
would
in the same place on every photo.
exactly. Yes.
So he knew something weird was happening. He just didn't know what this was, but he's thinking, "Okay, I think I'm looking at something that's not supposed to exist, and I can't tell anybody because I'm de- I'm dependent on my license with the FAA."
Yeah, your instructor of all things.
Right. So he didn't say anything. And then, of course, as time passed, it turned out that, his employees had seen that one. They had seen some other things. They had seen weird stuff happening, but nobody talked about it until finally one of the guys was ready to walk out and say, I'm done here. Nobody's talking about the crazy stuff. And then, everybody is like, oh, you mean it happened to you too? Oh, you
Right.
mean you saw this too? So,
Exactly, and that's all it takes.
yeah,
And then everybody spills their guts, which is thank God I'm not the odd man out, you know?
right, exactly. Yeah, and they were having all kinds of weird experiences. It wasn't just UFOs and, things in the sky. Uh, their personalities were affected. It
Are
seemed
you
like,
wait, I unplugged myself. Here we go. Their personalities were affected.
yeah,
That's very interesting.
yeah. So it was like, and he later um, termed what was happening. He felt like it was some kind of a demonic uh, influence or possession, and his wife was the one who was the most affected by it. But he said everybody else, when they would clock in at the airport in the morning, it was like their mood would turn dark and they'd be angry and mean, and it was just really weird. So that was kind of a big overall thing that kind of spanned really a lot of the story that of his
Let me
experience.
ask you, and this was obviously, like you said, he had been there several years before he even
Yeah.
sighted. Was the how can I say, the cutoff point after he spotted? In other words, everybody's fine, your employees are fine prior to the sighting, and it was after they or was it there all along, and then all of a sudden
That's a good question, and unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, so I can't
oh,
ask him some of these
okay.
questions. So, but he did say the UFOs and actually the crazy stuff didn't start until 2010. And
Right, okay.
the skeptic in me, when we were out there, I'm like, okay, did anything dramatically change in 2010 or
Right,
late
exactly.
2009? And he said, well, there was a drilling rig that the county put in near the south end of the runway, but he said they must not have found anything, so they pulled it up. But for years after that, they had to come. There was like a sinkhole there, and they had to keep coming and filling it in. And I
Mhm,
thought, well, did maybe they tapped into some kind of a gas pocket or something
mhm,
that could gases have escaped into the air that would cause hallucinations or cause people's personalities to change, but it, it I can't explain how it would have affected so many people. And
and I imagine it's opened air, it's not like,
right, right, yeah. So and it seemed to affect people around the airport too. So it wasn't just those at the airport. So I thought, could they have broken into a water line, and could toxins have gotten into the water? But it still really didn't explain a lot of the things that people saw, and that other multiple people supposedly saw the same thing. Now, I have yet to find enough of the witnesses
Mhm.
to really feel confident that that other people did see these things. But I've talked
How
to
many do you know? Did he ever tell you how many people he had working for him out there?
no, he didn't. But at one point in this story from the 2010 point on, his business really did start to take off. I mean, he had steady business before that,
Right, right.
but he said that it was starting to peak where he had to keep hiring people. He
Okay.
had lots of contracts. He had all kinds of work, and so he was doing really, really well. He was able to put money away for this house that he and his wife wanted to build, and all
Right.
that stuff. So yeah, they were doing really well. And then as the craziness started and ramped up and got really bad, his health got bad. He got sick. He was damaged multiple times by his wife, and we can get into that as she was affected by this. And
Okay.
then the combination of his health and the people, their personalities changing, and the stories getting out about his sightings. That he couldn't keep it quiet anymore
Mhm.
because it was getting out. So
And the reason why I was, obviously because it's like if you have X amount of employees, there's always the cranky, the grouchy one. But if you have across the board everybody all of a sudden, like you said, their personalities start getting across the board dark, it's like, okay, it's not just the one grouchy guy or
right.
the guy that's always, got a, he's just having a bad hair day every day.
Right.
There's but
Right.
you know what this reminds me of? And I'm sure you're familiar with Skinwalker Ranch
Yes.
and that
Yes.
they've had that what they call that hitchhiker effect. Because and the reason why I bring this up is before UFOs and extraterrestrials were over here and paranormal was over here.
Right.
And people did not think that these two things could overlap. And as you know, that they described in that book that they wrote, what was it, The Hunt for the Skinwalker or something, where
Hmm.
personnel, not even the researchers, anybody on the grounds of the ranch started experiencing paranormal events at their homes.
Right. Right.
And some of them had sightings, and what the common denominator amongst all of them was that they had been at the Skinwalker Ranch.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
prior to the present owner. So I'm wondering what you're describing, if this is something similar along those
It
lines.
is very similar. In fact, the Skinwalker is the closest story to what happened to Clay
Okay.
that I know of, and I'm actually going back to the original Skinwalker story because what we see on TV now
Mhm.
is a lot of technology and rockets and gauges and
Right.
machines and computers and all that. But before that, it was just a couple who were living and ranching at the ranch, and they were seeing like blue orbs floating through the air, or they saw a UFO that they said looked like a Winnebago in the distance, or there was a portal, that seemed like it was in the air, and I believe it was up on the mesa.
Right.
And one person could be standing there and they could see into the portal, and a person 100 feet away couldn't see the portal, couldn't see anything at all.
Right.
And they had an extra large wolf creature that was
Oh,
out
yeah, no,
there.
some of the things they describe is like, wow.
Right. And so really that was my first um, kind of comparison to what happened to Clay, but what happened to him was even crazier. I mean, it was that and more. And I had read the Skinwalker book that George Knapp and Colin Kelleher had
Mhm.
written, and so I knew quite a bit about the background from that, but again, it was nothing compared to what was going on at this airport that Clay was living and working at. So I had no, I mean, other than Skinwalker, I had no way to gauge what this was. Like you're saying,
Okay.
people typically would separate UFOs from ghosts. He saw
Yeah.
ghosts. Poltergeist. He had
Mhm.
poltergeist. Um, and so and demons and
What
angels.
happened what happened with his wife? That's interesting that his wife
Well, let me tell you the kind of the progression with his wife. It's like
okay.
when all this started, she was really sweet and thoughtful
Mhm.
and all this. And then her personality started getting darker and darker. And so the first thing that happened, she started getting kind of angry and more coarse. You know, she before she wouldn't swear or anything like that. She started
Like a
swearing.
personality change then.
Yes, exactly. And so, he thought maybe she was jealous. He had a secretary there. He thought maybe she was jealous of the secretary or something. So anyway, he
Mhm.
takes her out to dinner, and they were in separate vehicles because she was going to go to work, and they had a fight at dinner. So he walks her out to her truck, and so while they're talking out there, he's holding on to the door of her truck, and she slams the door on his hand and
Ah,
takes off and
oh,
drags him like a mile and a half
what?
along, yeah, from her truck.
Wow. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so, when she finally and then she stops and she lets him loose and then drives away. So he ended up in the hospital with he had multiple broken ribs. He had both of his arms had broken bones. He had a broken bone in his leg and abrasions all over. So,
I hate
he
to say
was
it, but it sounds like she was trying to kill him because you drag somebody.
it's crazy. I mean, I tried to think, could she have not known he
No,
was there?
it's like, no, I
I
didn't
don't
realize
think so.
you were hanging your I'm
Yeah,
sure he must have been screaming and yelling along the way.
right, exactly. So, so that was the first big thing, and he ended up in the hospital for a long time, and then, when he came home, obviously, he had to be in a wheelchair for a while, and it took some rehab, and he was in really good shape when all
Mhm.
this started. He ran up and down the runway, and he had a Bowflex kind of machine that he would work with first thing every morning. So he was really fit and healthy. And so so now he's got multiple broken bones that had to heal. So that wasn't a good thing. And then some more as time passed. The next big thing that happened was when his wife woke up. She looked like she was about 8 months pregnant, and he was freaking out because he's thinking, what could she have been bitten by or eaten, or what could be wrong with her that would cause her
Mhm.
belly to swell like this overnight?
Right.
And so he wanted to get her to the doctor, and she was not having any of it. And she got really mad. And actually, he had seen her a little bit earlier than this. In the refrigerator, they had some meat thawing in the fridge for dinner,
Okay.
and she was eating the raw meat out of the package.
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
And
I
that,
was gonna say, I'm gonna ask the obvious. Obviously, they stayed married after she dragged him, but he's a nice
yeah,
guy.
yeah,
I would have been like, "Oh,
exactly. I know, and his talking to his mom, he says, she couldn't convince him that there was something wrong with her and that he needed
okay."
to leave her, but, she said he was, love's a funny thing. And
Yeah.
so when but she finally she kicked him in the head, and he landed on the tile floor, knocked him out, and
Wait, wait,
then
wait, 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 wait.
yeah. So
This
he was trying to get her dressed so he could take her to the
so in other words,
doctor,
her reaction to going to the doctor was,
was to
"Wow,
completely not wanting it, and she kicked him in the head.
that's pretty savage."
Yeah. I mean, she had gotten up on the couch, and she was kind of pacing like an animal, and, uh
Okay, yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, just totally weird. And so when he came to, she was gone, and then she was gone several hours, and when she came back, her stomach was flat. So
Let me ask you, just I'm gonna interrupt you real quick because I know
yeah,
you did mention did she have a background of mental illness? Just out of did he ever tell you that, if there was something like that in her
you
background?
know, um, I don't know.
And by this, I don't mean like regular
Yeah,
I'm talking about because this sounds like really if it would have been mental illness, it would have been something severe, something that you would have been diagnosed because that's pretty,
that is severe. That is
yeah,
yeah. Well, and when it was all over and after he had passed away, I was talking to his mom,
uh-huh,
and in hindsight, you know how they say
yeah,
hindsight is 2020.
yeah,
Um, she was saying that looking back, she thinks that this woman was actually a serial murderer.
Holy
Yeah.
guacamole.
But
Okay.
but, that's a whole other.
No, that's good. You know what?
Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry. Moms sometimes have a good instinct for these things.
right.
I hate to well, you
But
know what? Sometimes it's just somebody when they say somebody on the outside looking in, they pick up on things.
well, right, and he did find out. Okay, so there was that incident with she looks pregnant, and then she doesn't, and then the third one was when he had told her she needed to move out from the airport
Okay. Oh no.
because it was affecting her too bad. He thought she was being possessed by whatever bad thing was there, and so he said for her well-being and for everybody for everybody
Yeah,
else's.
by the way, honey, for
Yeah,
my life, I
for my
wanna live.
life,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
She needed, and I think she went to live with her sister or something like
Oh, she
that.
did move? Holy
She did, but one day she shows up at the airport during the day with
uh,
his .38 Special revolver,
oh,
and she
ooh,
unloads this gun across the hangar where everybody's working, and she
oh
didn't
my
hit
god.
anybody, thank goodness, but, he said, "Thank goodness she was a bad shot," but then she claimed, "Well, I wasn't a bad shot, I deliberately didn't hit anybody, and this was just a warning," or whatever,
But what was I was gonna ask you, what w after that,
after
like,
that,
after I dragged you, what do you say to somebody? "I dragged you for a mile. Sorry, I."
okay, after, well, I don't know what she said,
I know, but,
but
you always think, like, what could
well,
you
after the shooting, she got arrested,
oh, thank
and
God.
he divorced her after that. He finally divorced her after that. So from that point on, now he was living at the airport and working
Okay,
there by himself. So all the rest of the stuff that happened out there was when when he was living there by himself. I mean, he still had people working for him, but
yeah.
as I said, as things got worse and worse, his health
But it
got
sounds
worse and
like
worse.
his life started to unravel kind of from what you're
Yes.
describing.
Yes, yes. I mean, between the damage to him, I mean, he had damage from this dragging incident, and just overall, his health kept getting worse. And then, he's got these sightings, and so now the reputation is kind of getting back to some of their clients. So some of the clients
Yes,
are backing out, and some of the employees don't want to be associated with this Looney Tunes situation, and they
right.
don't want that to damage their reputation, so they leave because they want to get jobs someplace else. So
Yeah,
it really affected him
yes.
um, pretty bad, until till it was down to just one employee. They no longer had their FAA license. That was another thing that he thinks that his ex-wife did. Um, One day he was out there working, and he said there had to be 50 law enforcement officers came busting in. There was FBI, ATF, and he said SWAT teams from 3 different locations,
Oh, boy.
and they came in, and took they took his computers, they took his files. He was as a hobbyist, he was a licensed gun manufacturer. He would make
Mhm.
replica antique weapons, or he could repair weapons and things like that. So he had, of course, and it's Texas, so he had lots of
Right.
he had lots of
Yeah.
guns, like most Texans do. And so they took all of his guns, they took his ammo, they took the computers, they took files. I mean, he said that they made a mess of it, and they took him, and they didn't charge him with anything, but they told him that there was this email that had gone out to all of his clients that said, "I'm gonna shoot you with an AK-47."
Yeah, he
Eh,
got swatted. That's what they call it, that swatting
yeah,
thing.
so but this was before
Before the swatting thing. Yeah,
right
exactly.
before it was a big thing.
Right.
And so but it supposedly was sent from his own email address, and he said, well,
Oh,
yeah, so he said, well, a lot of my employees know the email address for the business, so that's not unusual. But he said, to make it look like it came from his computer, it could have been his ex-wife. So, but he said that when he got everything back, he said a lot of his evidence, his best videos and
Right.
photos of the UFOs and aliens and weird stuff happening, he said were gone off of his
Ah, that puts a
computers.
different spin on it, kind of.
Yeah. So, I mean, that might have just been a bonus for them.
Sure.
He said he thought that they didn't like him to begin with because he was a gun uh, fan, and
Right, 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 and
he
he
was into that, and so he felt like they wanted to take him down, and they were just looking for any excuse.
right, because I'm thinking, oh, and that's the thing nowadays, yeah, well, even back then, it's like, well, you know, um, I understand that a lot of times they wanna err on the side of safety,
Right.
but at the same time, it's like, yeah, it makes you wonder what was the origin or the motivation behind it. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, it was kinda weird. He said he felt like they were just looking for any excuse to take him down, but, it could have been, uh, helped along with
Sure.
his ex-wife, just she knew she had access to all the, email addresses to all of his clients. She could have sent that
Right,
out,
right, exactly. Or
and
she might have
then
had the password, you never
she
know.
did have she did have the password.
Oh, and he never
Yeah,
changed it. Oh, God
yeah,
bless America,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, she
It's
did.
like,
But
alright.
they never charged him. They held him for, like, 8 hours, and, uh, so I don't know if that would be in the records. We've got an investigator on our team that hopefully we can find out some of these things, but,
Right.
um, so that I think that was, like, one of the last things her parting gift, you
Let
know?
me tell you something, that lady, she sounds very vindictive.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
and
besides the crazy part, but
yeah, I mean, when I got to the end of the story and talked to his mom, now
Mhm.
I looked at the ex-wife in a whole different way,
Okay.
that she was bad to the bone from the beginning. But, he didn't know that. He never told me anything bad about her, and his mom said that, he loved her so much, he overlooked everything.
Right, he had a blind spot when it came to
Yeah,
him. Yeah.
yeah,
Right, right. So, well, you know what? And you always hear it sometimes with these situations of either if not out and out possession, but obsession or oppression, you'll have somebody that's got that personality, and then what's their influences to go that extra mile, like what she did, like dragging him, in a truck or
right.
doing what she did. In other words, they're not the greatest people to begin with, but then they get pushed into doing extreme things that, I mean, he could have been killed when she dragged him.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
true.
and that thing about the shooting stuff, it's like, come on, this lady. I'm surprised he kept any of his employees after that. I'd be like,
Well, and he was too, and he obviously after it happened, he has kind of a shop meeting and says, "Okay." And he had multiples of these meetings where he said, "After this latest thing, anybody who wants to quit,
if you ever see my
uh,
ex-wife again, just duck.
yeah, but I mean, he was giving his employees the opportunity to,
Right, 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 right.
you can I won't hold anything against you. I'll give you a good recommendation if you feel like you need to leave.
Sure.
And so it was a miracle that anybody stayed with him
Of course,
for as
because
long as they did.
yeah, 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 yeah. But again, like you saying, this
Mm.
and a lot it's really funny because Pat, I say contrary to what you see in the movies, sometimes when people have this, whether it's the UFO, extraterrestrial, paranormal, or demonic influence, it's not like this doesn't happen in 72 hours. It's like that, exactly like what you just described, where things start to unravel little by little.
Right.
Nobody has a perfect life, but it sounds like up to then he was pretty much okay.
Yeah.
He had a
Yeah.
good business, he was married, he's, got plans, he's building a house,
That's right.
things are chugging along,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden everything goes whoop,
Yeah.
and,
And just kinda snowballed.
yes,
It
yes,
it wasn't, it was a trickle, and then it was a little more, and then pretty
mhm,
next thing you know, it's, this gusher of bad news and crazy stuff going on.
yes, yes, and let me ask you, well, obviously, can you disclose how old he was when he passed away?
I think he was in his mid-50s.
Okay, well, so he was not because you I
No,
know you mentioned his mom was still alive, so I'm thinking,
yeah,
"Okay, this guy wasn't really that old then if his mom was
no,
still alive."
no, and he was, like I said, he was very fit when all this started. He was working out
Mhm.
every morning. So, you know, it affected him in 3 years and a few months.
Right.
It just it just dragged him downhill like crazy between the physical damage, and then, we talked about that oblong shaped
Mhm.
craft that he reached up and
Yes.
touched. Well, that when he reached up and touched that thing, it was just down to him and one other employee, and they could no longer do, you know, aircraft repairs. They were just doing sheet metal and stuff like that.
Right.
But he said when he reached up and touched that thing, he said it felt like wet leather. He said it was like this ship was living, like it was organic.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
in
then he said it sprayed him. And apparently this spray was like chemical burns. The remaining employee that was with him that night, it was burning him. So the employee drags him into the hangar, and where they have a shop shower because they work with chemicals, uh,
Yes.
and so they have an emergency shower there. And so he put him in the emergency shower, starts ripping off his clothes, and because this whatever it was burning him, and he
Mhm.
ended up in the hospital with, I think, mostly second degree burns, some third
That's
degree
pretty
burns.
that's
Yeah,
bad.
but he said that the doctors argued over whether they were chemical burns or radiation burns. He said in some ways it acted like radiation burns. So that's something I want to track down. I want to track down the doctors and find out what about it was like radiation burns.
Mhm.
Why?
And I've heard of that, of people having encounters. I've heard also where some of these ships have touched down and then the area where they've been there, it just basically it's like salting the earth, nothing grows.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's almost like there's something about them or their in I don't know what to call it, their technology that's antithetical to Earth, like Earthlings and Earth.
Right. Well, and it's funny. I watched your interview with Larry Lawson, and I was on
Uh-huh.
Larry's show, and we were talking about radiation, and I
Right.
said, if you're familiar with Bob Lazar,
Yes.
he claimed to work at Area 52 on
Mhm.
reverse engineering UFOs, and he said that the power supply, and that was his specialty, was to analyze the power supply. And he said it worked on this element 115 that doesn't occur naturally on Earth. And
Okay.
I think at the time that Bob Lazar talked about it, our physicists hadn't even produced it at all.
Okay.
They have since, in like a super collider, like at CERN in Switzerland or
Right.
whatever. I believe they've produced it, but I'm thinking, okay, so maybe if the ship is running off of element 115, maybe it is radioactive,
Yes.
and that's why like you're saying, the ground doesn't grow after after it's landed there.
Right.
And, maybe there's and I hadn't thought about this before, but maybe, uh, the spray from that one ship, was a chemical burn, but
Yes.
maybe because he was so close to the power supply, he
Yes.
also got radiation from it. Now, that's something I hadn't thought about before, but that's a possibility.
Right. Exactly. And I've heard of other what was it? God, I've heard of people, even if they haven't had contact, if they've been hit by the lights, they say that sometimes comes off some of these crafts, that some of them have either gotten either a light sunburn or what looks like a light sunburn,
Yes.
but then they've
Yes.
had like they feel sick, and in sometimes they've had incidents of cancer like down the road.
Right. Right.
Um, and that's not even actually touching it. That's just being hit with the light that's coming off of it.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of Terry Lovelace, his book Incident at Devil's Den. He was out in an unauthorized part of a wilderness park. I think he was a paramedic for the military or something. And so he was out with another paramedic. They were camping for, they were
Mhm.
taking a little vacation. They went camping and they woke up late at night and there was this bright light outside of their tent and it was a UFO. And they got those kinds of burns you're talking about.
Right.
And when they got back to the base, they were diagnosed with radiation burns. So yeah, that definitely can happen.
Yeah, there's something, I don't know, maybe not all the crafts, so some of them or some things,
Yeah,
maybe they have different types of technology. This is we're assuming a lot here. Um,
yeah.
and
I
let me
mean,
ask you that thing about that he shot one, I mean, what happened? Did they come after him? Or obviously there was something about him or that
right.
place.
Yeah. So I need to give you that kind of the progression of his
Okay,
encounters
okay,
with
sure.
the aliens. So there were a lot of different creatures and aliens that he had seen, but there were multiple occasions with the Greys. So the first encounter was he's now living by himself out here at
Mhm.
the airport. And one night he woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he said that this started happening a lot, that he would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning or around
Okay.
three. And some say that's the witching hour, or, that's when, I don't know.
Right,
But
right.
he he was awake and he couldn't sleep, so he said, "Well, I'll just call my sister," because she was working in China at the time, so it
Okay.
was broad daylight, middle of the day for her.
Right.
So he called her and he's chatting with her and he's kind of telling her a little bit about, you see, you wouldn't believe the weird stuff that's happening to me, and of course she's going, well, I might try me, kind
Yeah,
of thing.
right.
And so, he's telling her a little bit about this. And so he was kind of an antsy guy. And while they're talking, he's pacing around and he just kind of absently walks over to the door that goes between his hangar and the office that's
Mhm.
between the hangar and he's in the apartment. This is the door from the apartment into the office. And he grabs the doorknob and he's just kind of chatting with her and he turns the doorknob and he opens it up and he sees on his left these two gray aliens. And he said they were identical. They looked identical to him. They were about 3 or 4 feet tall. And he said it was like they were joined together.
Okay.
And he said when he opened the door up, they moved away like they were a gate, like they were literally joined together. And
Mhm.
he and for me, the skeptic, I think, this is one of those little details that make me think, either this guy has an incredible imagination or this
Right.
really happened. Who would make that up?
Right.
You know? So and all this particular thing happened in a space of, I don't know, maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds. It was not very long. So he opens the door, the two gray aliens move out of the way, and he said they were all in silver. And he looks over to the right and he sees this tall guy, tall alien, and that's the one that, he looked like he was naked. So, um,
Okay.
he didn't have any features though. He had no genitals or anything that, so that's why I say he looked like a Ken doll.
Right, 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 right.
And, not all the way, but I mean, he was like that, featureless on his body.
Right.
And then he said the head was really big and the eyes were big and they were too big for the sockets, so they were bulging out of the sockets.
Okay.
And the lids closed top and bottom. And he said there were bulges in the back of the head. And he said I knew right away that this guy was the bodyguard for the two little guys. And
Okay.
then he said the big guy took a step forward and I freaked out. And so he backed out, closed the door, dropped the phone, and didn't go back in there for I don't know how long. Um, but that was his first encounter with, up close and up close and personal with the aliens.
So in
And
other words, and this is one of the distinctions I wanna make. He felt, and it sounds like he felt that they were dangerous. How's this? It wasn't like, let's all, like in the Close Encounters of the Third
right,
Kind.
right. ET
"Oh,
phone.
let's
Right,
trade and you take some of us and we'll." No,
right,
it sounds like he was like, besides being wigged out, which I would be, it's like, "No, I don't
right.
really wanna find out if you're friendly or not. I'm gonna assume you're not." And so I'm closing the
Well,
door.
and he didn't feel threatened by the 2 little guys, the grays,
Right.
but the big guy. So, so that yes, so that started his, this journey of his, realizing that if nothing else, these creatures can come into my home, into my
Okay.
building, my locked building,
Right.
and I can't really do anything about it. Now, if they're nice, that's one thing, but if they're not nice, I can't I
I'm in
can't
trouble.
yeah. So that was the first real up close and personal. Um, then there was an encounter where he and his secretary were in the hangar after hours one night, and they heard movement, and they kind of saw something. And the secretary said, "Well, it looks like a kid. There's a kid." And they're thinking, "My God, if there's a child here in the
Mhm.
hangar, we're in the middle of nowhere. Where are their parents? Where's the
Right.
parents of this kid? Something's not right."
Sure.
And so they're trying to get this kid so they can find out who it is and
So
where he
at this
belongs.
point, they're not thinking alien.
They're
They're
not
thinking there's a kid somehow out here in the middle of
exactly.
nowhere.
Exactly. And it's scared. They're thinking it's scared. So they're trying to coax it out, and
Oh,
finally they see that it's not a kid, it's one of the little grays, and Clay shouts to his secretary, "Get out of here." And this thing had a breastplate or something, some kind of, I don't know, vest or something that shot this blue beam out. He said it was like a laser beam. It was about 4 inches in diameter, and it cut through everything in its path. It cut through, an airplane. It cut through scaffolding. It cut through the outside wall of
oh,
the
wow.
hangar. Now, this is corrugated steel. It cut through that. And if he wasn't scared before, he's scared now.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this terrified him. It traumatized his secretary. And so now he's first of all, he's thinking if they wanted to kill me, they could kill me.
Alright, they
You
can get
know,
in whenever they want, and that
right.
thing is like, "Okay, God."
Right. So, so he's carrying gun. He's got a gun on his workbench. He's got a gun on his hip. He has guns everywhere. So while he might have had his guns locked up in the gun safe before, he has
Mhm.
them out where he can put his
I
hands on them.
I would too.
Yeah, yeah. So that was kind of a real eye opener that
Mhm.
yes, they can kill me. They can kill me if they want to, and maybe they do want to. Why this thing didn't get him, I don't know. Or
Okay.
maybe they just wanted to scare him. I don't know. Maybe it was just their fear reaction where, a human might wet their pants. This one
Right.
shot off a blue
Let me ask
beam.
you
I
something.
don't know.
Prior to I'm curious, did you ever find out or did he ever tell you, prior to him owning this space, was there something out there before?
That's something we've been trying to find out. We've looked back in
Okay.
the records of
Mhm.
the properties, and we haven't found anything interesting yet. But we're still looking.
And the reason why I'm asking is I'm thinking maybe what these things wanted to do is scare him off, like, "Get out of here."
I
It
hadn't thought about that, but that's a good point. That's a really good point.
I'm thinking, "We want you out of here," for whatever reason,
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll have to look into that. But
And
yeah, we are looking yeah, we've gone back to I think we've gone as far as 1900 on
okay,
the land records, and we need to go back to the county and look back farther.
right.
So
And,
yeah,
and the reason also why I ask is sometimes, it's really funny, but sometimes things are registered in county or whoever has these records, and then other things, I tell people all the time, even the paranormal, you have communities and things happening that are not where you can later on go back and verify, oh, there was this person owned it, or they had something there. There's so not everything
Right,
was documented, in other words. But I
right.
was curious, is like, I wonder if there was something about that piece of land specifically.
And that's definitely something we wanna find out. You were talking in that interview with Larry about the story that Poltergeist was based on,
Yes.
where there was a cemetery that didn't show up on the land records.
Yes, yes. This was
And
well, they have a bunch
yeah,
of them, but,
right,
as a matter of fact, when I was in South Florida, I mean, there was one in Texas, which is, they made a story
right.
in a movie
Yeah, it
back in
was
the
in
'80s,
Houston. Yeah, it was in
and
Houston.
but, when I was in, living down before I moved up here to North Florida, I mean, I was born and raised in Miami, and I did a research, and when Flagler came in, he was the one putting the railroad down, like, through Florida, from North Florida. This is, like, turn of the century.
Mhm.
What happens is, they would have workers coming in to, work on these places. People wanted to get work, so they would come out, all these workers from all over the US. So they ended up having, people would get killed on the job kind of deal.
Right.
A lot of these people, they didn't have family members, or if they did, nobody was going to, you ship them back to wherever. A lot of these people were basically they were unattached to family,
Mhm.
had no family of origin, that kind of deal. So what they did was, and by the way, at this time, city of Miami had how when towns start going, they establish the post office, the cemetery,
Right,
but it
right.
was far away from where this was at. This was way, I want to say maybe 40 miles away. And back in those days, 40 miles was a long distance
Yeah,
as
yeah.
far as so what they ended up doing was they started doing like an unofficial burial ground for these workers that were killed on and off while they were working on this railroad project. Come to find out later on, this man that owned the land, it's expanding, and he turns out he's such a nice guy. He gives like an acre of land for the first school down there in Homestead.
Wow.
Guess what was there? Because see, back then also
Ah,
they weren't raising any, first of all, if there was ever a cross or wooden, there was nothing there, no granite, there's
right,
no
right.
markers. Come to find out, they built one of the oldest elementary schools down in Homestead, Florida, which is a community south,
Mhm. I've been there.
okay, where they had been burying all these workers from basically it was an unofficial graveyard. How's that? It
Right.
wasn't like
Yeah.
it was just too far away, but that happens a lot sometimes where or sometimes nowadays, you sometimes find these places that will do, even in Philadelphia, they've had stories where they'll start doing renovations, or they're digging because they're going to put up a new building, and they start digging up coffins from 200 years ago, and
Right.
then they'll say, hey, you know what? All these graves supposedly were moved to this
Right.
new cemetery. Guess what?
They moved the headstones, they
They
didn't
moved the
move the
headstones
bodies.
like the Poltergeist, and they didn't do it.
Right.
So sometimes, yeah, that's
Right.
why I'd say sometimes it's the land. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is definitely an open question for us.
Right.
There's an Indian reservation nearby, so,
Mhm.
one of the possibilities, we're gonna check that out, to see if it had been Indian land. So
Or I wonder if the tribe that's there, if they had could say, "Oh, yeah, they had over there." "No, we never go out there, man. Forget it." You know,
right,
like
right, yeah,
like in Skinwalker,
yeah,
the youths are like, "Man, you guys are crazy. We know. We
that's
that
right, that's
that's
right.
that's where the Skinwalker, that's the where the witches die. So we're out of there.
Yeah,
Sorry."
yeah.
You
So,
know?
I mean, that's a very real possibility, and we wanna look into that and find out what's going on. I
And sometimes
actually have, a team of, remote viewers who have been
okay,
looking at the property. They don't know where it is. They don't even know what they're
okay,
looking for, which
okay,
is kind of fun. Um,
okay.
and so, it'll be interesting to see what they come up with, as far as, you know, where they think the target is, because that's all they know. There's a
Right.
target. It could
And
be
the
anywhere
reason
in the
why
world.
also a lot of these tribes sometimes, and I'm sure you've heard of it, they're very hesitant to talk about these things, much less write about it. In other words, if there's information, it's oral tradition.
Right, right.
Like, no, we don't even talk about it, much less write about it. No, you're not gonna find anything about that piece of land, that mountain, whatever it is. We
Yeah,
know to stay away from it. It's just very whispered, and we'll not talk about this again because there is, whether you want to call it superstition or a good reason to behave that way.
Yeah. So, we're hoping to, to really spend some time out in that area and just talk to people who have lived there for a long time and first of all, find out if other people have had
You
uh,
said that there was a little
sightings.
town close by?
Yeah, there's a little town. And so, I want to talk to people, just people on the street, especially people who have lived there for a long time or
Mhm.
their families, grown up there,
Sure.
they've lived there for a long
Yeah, those
time.
are the ones that will tell you some good stories if there's any to be told.
I know for a fact that there have been sightings in that town since he left
Oh,
and in nearby towns. So it has not stopped.
let me
So
ask you, when he did he ever move away from there while
yeah,
he was still
in 2013 he was so sick
okay.
that he just couldn't do it, and his mom was the one who really kind of broke the tie. She said, "You got to get out of here." And so, she had to have helpers pack up, with
Mhm.
big, heavy cranes to pick up uh, heavy machinery, put them in shipping containers, and bring them out to her property. And uh, got him to move in with her. They built a wing onto their house so that he could have his
Mhm.
own apartment. But and strangely enough, it stopped. So, all of
There's where I was going with this.
yeah,
What
so
happened?
all of the people who say, "Well, he was making this up or he was
Mhm.
exaggerating or whatever," it's like, maybe he was hallucinating, maybe he was making it up, maybe he's lying. Why did it stop? Why did he stop hallucinating? Why did he stop
Yes,
lying? Why did
exactly.
he stop exaggerating when he moved out to his mom's house? That piece doesn't fit to me.
Right, right, exactly.
So
Exactly.
so we were talking about the alien, so let me get
Yes,
to the
yes,
to the buried alien. So that was the first the second one was the gray that shot out the blue beam.
yes.
So now he knows they are definitely armed and dangerous. So now he was working one day, and I believe this was during the day, and um, another gray showed up in the hangar, and a couple of employees were there, and he shot it. Just reflex.
Let
He's
me tell you something, that's great. I'm sorry, but I think that's fantastic because
yeah,
you hear so many of those people, "Are you friendly?"
yeah.
"Hey."
Well,
"Oh, no, man."
and the funny thing is that throughout all of this, he was he was fascinated by the idea that there were creatures from somewhere else that had more technology, more advanced technology, more knowledge than we have, and he wanted to get to know them. So, on the one hand, he's scared to death of them.
Right,
On the other hand, he desperately wanted to know them. I mean, one night, one night, he packed a bag and he sat out on the runway, kind
right,
of, "Come on down, take me for a ride." So
right,
I packed 3 days worth of underwear
right.
and, my toothbrush and my shaving kit, but he said, "I only packed 1 change of clothes because I figured they'd have one of those silver jumpsuits
Yeah, it's
jumpsuits
like,
for me
yeah,
to wear."
right, and maybe, and it's like it's one of those things that, I know it's touchy-feely, don't get me wrong, I think it would be wonderful if first contact was ever friendly,
Right.
but, maybe they wanna experiment on you, we gotta think of that too,
I know.
and
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people, who have been abducted talk about, and
yeah,
that it was painful and terrifying, and that halfway through this procedure, they're trying to communicate to the aliens that this hurts, and the aliens like, "Oh, okay, well, I can stop that," and waves a hand or whatever, claw or whatever they are,
yeah,
and they make it stop, but, that this isn't something you wish for. This is
exactly,
not something you'd want them to be
mhm,
drilling into your eyes or up your nose or into your belly button or
or anything like that,
yeah.
exactly,
So now we have the second alien, he shoots it, but it starts outgassing. He said it was bleeding some kind of blue stuff, and then it was outgassing something that they were choking on. So he and his employees leave the hangar,
Okay.
And when they come back, the thing was gone. So he's thinking, in the light side of him, he's thinking, "Well, I hope I didn't kill him."
Right.
I would feel bad if I killed him. I'm just defending myself, but, hopefully the alien paramedics came and got him and, patched him up and he was
Yeah.
all okay. But he said the thing left behind a helmet. He said it was like a skull cap kinda thing, so it wasn't a big bulky thing.
Mhm.
And in fact, he said you wouldn't have known that it was wearing a helmet when you saw it
Okay.
alive with the thing on it. So he buried that helmet in this spot in the woods somewhere.
Okay.
And so then the final incident was he was there by himself at the hangar, and this other alien, well, again, another gray showed up, and again, he shot it, only this time he killed it. So now he's got this body, and he said, I'm looking at this body, and I'm thinking, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
He's like, if you had told me 2 years ago that I'd have an alien body
Yeah.
and I wasn't putting it in the back of my truck and driving all over the country, going on Oprah show and
Yeah.
CNN and just telling everybody about this, I would
Right.
have said you were crazy.
Right. Stuff and mount it kind of deal. No, I mean, I know but I know what he's saying. Like,
Yeah,
it's the kind of thing you think about, but you expect will never happen to you.
right. And so, but in the moment, he said it was more profound and it was not easy to deal with. And he said he was kind of mentally shorting out. So he said, I need to buy myself some time. So he wraps it up, double wraps it in black plastic, heavy black plastic, puts it in a box, and he takes it to his cousin had a restaurant with a walk-in freezer.
Oh my god.
I know.
I wonder if his cousin knew what he was putting in there.
Part of this is like a comedy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, crazy. And really some of the story is a lot people don't understand that there are some funny things in the book, but so he takes this alien body and takes it to his cousin's restaurant and says, "Can you hang on to I shot this feral pig." And
Okay.
because we have pigs all over the place, wild pigs, and they tear
Yeah.
up your lawn and everything. And so anybody who wants to shoot a pig out here is welcome to
Yeah, no,
shoot a pig.
we got some out here. Yeah.
Yeah,
We
that's
got some
right.
out here where I'm at. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, he said, can I keep it in your freezer for a while till I figure out how to, what I'm going to do with it. So his cousin says, yeah. So he leaves it in the freezer. But, as time went on, he started feeling like I really need to do something with this. I don't feel right. I realized in the interviews with him, because I could never get him to really talk about that last alien that he shot. He would
Okay.
always change the subject, or he'd say, "Well, I'll write it down for you," or "I wrote it down in a journal. I'll go find the journal."
Uh-huh.
So it was really hard, and I could see that this was a trigger for him.
Right.
And so finally, he said, "I don't want to talk about it." And I said, "You're going to have to talk about it if you're going to be on Jimmy's show. If Jimmy is going to tell your story on his TV show,
Right.
you have to talk about this. If you're going to dig up whatever's out there, you have to talk
Exactly.
about this." So he said, I'm afraid that people are going to read about this or see this, and they're going to think I'm some kind of animal. I shot
Yeah.
a living creature. And I said, okay, but you got to cut yourself some slack. If this was a bear in your hangar, you would
Right.
have shot it. And he said, well, I don't know. So in that little moment, I realized that this was a tender-hearted guy
Right.
who would have hated to even kill a bear.
But, yeah, it sounds like he had been going through some really rough times as far as scared, being scared
Right.
all the time, so I
Right.
don't blame him.
Right. Yeah. So, but he felt really bad. And in fact, um, after he moved out to his mom's house, he said, she told me that he came to her and he said, "I screwed up, Mom. I wanted to know them. I wanted to find out what they know. I wanted to go for a ride with them in their ship. I screwed up." I never should have tried to hurt them. Now, they were trying to hurt him.
But I was gonna say,
It's
he's assuming a lot. He's assuming that they're
yeah,
friendly,
yeah,
okay? He's assuming that they're going to treat you at least as equivalents
right.
or as equals, like, "Oh, let's reach out, these species, civilizations." Like, "Ah, you know what? I'm sorry, but
I
in a
know.
situation like that, I'd be very careful
Yeah, but
because
it was funny that he was so sensitive about it.
yeah.
Here's
And I understand.
this
In
macho
other
guy,
words,
but
he
he
wasn't a psychopath is what you're
right,
saying.
right. He was compassionate.
Yeah, he was compassionate about what happened.
And so, he really felt bad about it. So he goes back to his cousin. He gets the quote unquote feral pig, and he takes it back and he buried it. He built a box for it and he buried it. And he said some words, like a little religious ceremony. And the funny thing was, he told me when we talked many times, he said, when all this started, he said, I was about as religious as a hog. But he said, by the time it was all over,
Mhm.
I had rediscovered my faith. And he had been raised Catholic, and his mom was
Right.
Catholic, is Catholic. And so, through the course of this, he went from being totally, I don't know if he was agnostic or atheistic or what, he just didn't have anything to do with religion.
Right.
And slowly over time, he started, especially with the demonic aspects of what went on,
Yes.
he started thinking, maybe there is something to this. Maybe all of this. One of the guys that I interviewed, one of the witnesses, um, said he believes all of it was demonic, that even the alien uh, presentations were really demonic in their
Yes.
core.
I've heard of this before,
So,
that viewpoint, as far
yeah,
as I've heard that also raised before. And again, people wanna say there's 2 totally separate, like, what are you talking demonic and the extraterrestrials? No, but I have heard that viewpoint before and,
yeah,
whether you wanna call them intradimensional beings or whatever,
yeah.
it's a
We don't
weird
know. I
thing.
mean, yeah. So there's the interdimensional aspect. Is it time traveling? Is it demonic and just creating the illusion of all these different creatures,
Right.
or is it demonic energies that are empowering real creatures? There's so many
Yeah.
possibilities we don't know.
Right, and that's the and I think the concern most people will say is you always get the feeling that in the equation we're going to be at a disadvantage because usually when you have civilizations where one is more technologically advanced than the other, the one that's less ends up getting the short end of the stick. And kind of if you're talking to somebody, whether it's demonic or an actual extraterrestrial form, that can, let's say, do interdimensional travel, is like, okay, they're superior to us in technology at the very least.
Right.
So,
Right.
and then, you get all these, I mean, we could go into, people, the abductees, the cattle mutilations. I mean,
Right.
some of their, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, uh, s- and, it's sometimes because, and you think about it, are we trying to make them think like us? Like, how's this? When you see a lion kill a gazelle, you don't call the lion evil, even though we might go,
Right.
"Oh my god, it killed the gazelle,"
Right.
but,
Right.
we wanna put our morality, let's say, on a different
Right.
type of species, extraterrestrials, but
Right.
there's always a flavor in some stories that they're I don't know, that they're kind of like a little bit like, sadistic? What's the word?
Or robotic,
Or robotic, yeah,
and they don't have the capacity for compassion or empathy. It's like that one, that I was talking about earlier, where they're doing experiments on you, and it's painful, and you they're able to use telepathy, and you're beaming out, help me, this hurts, stop
right.
it. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that hurt. I
I
didn't
have
know this
heard
was
some
painful.
people think that the grays are biomechanical, and I don't know if you've heard of that.
I have heard that,
Yeah,
and I'm not gonna say that that's not the case. I mean, look at us as a species.
yes,
We're on the cusp of moving into, we've got AI,
I was gonna
Uh,
say AI. Like, oh yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So I mean, and Ray Kurzweil has predicted that I think it's 2043 that by that date, robots, artificial intelligence will be the dominant species on Earth, and that scares the crap out of me.
Of course it does. And
But
what they were saying is that you know how they say that let's say the Terminator, that becomes self-aware and it takes
right,
over. But one of the things that they say even now with AI is that yes, of course, depending on what's being fed to it as far as information, eh, but as far as it extrapolates, it doesn't it can't think like a human. As in, let's say I'm going to lay a trap for you kind of deal. They can't somehow or other they can't foresee that because of the way that AI thinks. So, but yes, it scares me a lot when I think of that.
yeah,
Myself, it's like,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, it
yeah,
does. It does.
yeah.
And I
So,
don't get me and a lot of people think AI. I say, I don't think AI is bad. I don't know if you remember the what was it, the second I want to use Hollywood because this is a good example. You remember the second Alien movie
mhm,
where she comes back at the very end and Ripley, the character, she jumps into that mechanical
right,
suit where
right,
she was using it to move stuff around. I'm
right.
great with that AI
Oh
because
yeah,
it's not sentient or intelligent.
right,
It
right,
turns on and you can move heavy stuff around. I think that's
right.
great.
Yeah, it's just a tool.
It's a tool, exactly. It's the
Right,
other
and
AI.
it's controlled by the human movement.
Yes,
It doesn't have its own um, ability to decide what to do and predict what's going to happen
sure.
or adjust to circumstances like that. So yeah, that the whole idea that AI is so rapidly developing, um, and that we could have robots
Well,
or robotic kinds of creatures or cyborgs. They're
yeah, of
implanting more
course.
and more mechanical pieces into humans.
Right.
They're able to, for people who have lost a limb or they're paralyzed and they can't control a limb. They've now got implants where you're just by thinking about it, your
You
brain
can
can drive the movement of a leg or an arm, or a hand. So I mean, those are wonderful innovations. I think that's amazing for people
but
who have
sometimes it's that's the thing. See, it starts out like that. Like, hey, you have some quadriplegic or somebody
right,
that they wanna help them, and everybody's of course. And
right,
then the evil scientist, let's go with that,
right,
decides to go in another direction with it with that technology.
yeah,
And then you've got the superhumans or somebody that, hey, you really didn't you're not missing an arm, but I'm gonna get it cut off and I'm gonna put this super strong arm now.
right.
And I know I sound like a sci-fi nut, but I don't think it's that way out there either.
Well, I think the military's probably already developing or has developed augmentation of some kind, or maybe they're even looking at building an all new, like a super soldier. But I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they weren't augmenting human beings as soldiers to give them more strength or more uh, agility or better um, vision.
Well,
Night vision. They could switch into night vision.
and what they were talking about the other day, I can't remember what I was listening to, that they were talking about down the line, law enforcement being a robot, and they will present it as in, the robot will not have preferential treatment. In other
Hmm.
words, you can't say, "Oh, officer, please, I was getting late to work," like
Right.
kind of like,
Right.
you know. But at the end of the day, you're having these mechanisms that, like you said, don't understand pain
Right.
in charge of you. And real quick, that movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, right? The
Hmm.
original one. Well,
Right.
that's based on a short story called Farewell to the Master. And it's
Ah.
kinda like a little bit the same thing, and the thing lands. But in that one, the spaceman, by mistake, he gets killed, and there's a big robot that's come off the
Right.
thing, doesn't move for months and months. I'm doing a real, like, very
Right.
and everybody they've built months have gone by, and this robot just stands there.
Right.
and they don't know what to do, but they're like, "Oh my god, whoever sent this craft, we hope that they don't take it against us that we killed their emissary," right?
Right.
So one day there's this one guy who's a photographer for a newspaper, and he's been hanging out. One day he notices he's looking at some things, and he realizes that the robot moved. Like,
Ah,
usually it was standing, but he
right.
saw something that so he starts basically realizing, and he breaks the story, and everybody's, like, wondering. So one day, finally, this thing actually moves, and at the end, they tell the robot, "If you're gonna go back to your people, please tell them that we did not mean to kill your master. It was
Right.
a mistake, it was somebody that was crazy. Please go back." And this one guy who's a newspaper reporter leans down and tells him in his ear, "What are they talking about? I am the master." In other words, everybody was assuming that the master was the guy that got killed and the robot was
Ah,
serving him.
oh,
He
that's
is the
great.
master. Okay, this is like I wanna say the story was either in the 30s or in the 40s, and it's called Farewell to the Master.
Can you remember who wrote it?
Oh my god, now I can't. I'm throwing like but
Yeah.
it's but look it up because and on that is the one that they based The Day the Earth Stood Still. They kinda use the parameters of it,
Yeah.
but really the original story, and when I read that, I was like, considering what's going on now, it was like,
Right.
"Wow, okay, this guy was ahead of
Right.
his time. He is the master
He
because
is
everybody's
the
like, "Please go back, tell your planet or whatever, we didn't mean to kill your master," and he is the master.
wow.
The robot is the master.
That's
So,
very cool.
that's what we're facing nowadays, but
Yeah.
and then in this, again, you throw the, um, the extraterrestrials, and are they biomechanical? Are
Well,
they
and if we're advancing into robotics and cybernetics, who's to say that a culture that's so many years ahead of us wouldn't would I we humans couldn't survive uh travel in space
right,
long
exactly.
distance with
Interstellar
the
space.
with the technology we have now. So if we were going to do it, it would make sense to do it with robots or artificial
Or
creation.
that is if, we're talking but if it's maybe that whole thing is that we talk about interdimensional where it's not like how we're thinking about light years because
Right.
you know how they say, well, by the time you get there, you'd
Right.
be 3 generations out. What
Right.
if there is, like, either a wormhole and this is me,
Right.
by no mean am I a physicist or
Yeah.
and as a matter of fact, when you mentioned earlier that thing about the CERN, the collider at CERN, and I know there's a lot of different colliders out there.
Mhm.
Sometimes I worry about that too. It's like, what are these guys? They're gonna collide something they shouldn't, you know?
Well, and it's interesting. I read a book, oh, years ago, and it was about it was about a scientific lab that created a mini black hole, and
Oh,
it started gobbling
I was about to say that.
matter up, and it was just spinning, and every time it would spin, like sometimes it would spin through the earth, and it would cut a hole through the earth, and
Mhm.
you know, it's,
Let me tell you
I
something. Well, it's scary when you think about it. I mean, sci-fi, I wanna say there's another movie, and it's like a sci-fi kinda thing, but it's called Event Horizon, when it
Mhm.
talks about what happens
Right.
basically with, going through a black hole kinda deal,
Right.
where it's basically it takes you to hell is when you look at the movie, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's sometimes these people working on colliders, my concern is that they don't know what they're doing, and one of the things when you said about Bob Lazar, I remember, I mean, I've heard different, interviews with that he's given, and if I remember correctly, one of the things that he said was that he was seeing some of them trying when they were back engineering some of this technology, and he says he was concerned because he says, "I don't think they really understand what you're back" in other words, what you're working with to try to back
Right.
engineer it, like, you might explode this thing might blow up, and that's the end of us or this or
Right.
wherever they were at. He was like, they were dabbling with stuff that they really didn't understand,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is,
And that was what he was trying to do. He was trying to figure out, what is this? How does it work?
yeah,
How does it provide propulsion for
yes.
these craft? Um, and I you know, he I actually haven't finished his book, but
Mhm.
it's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's not at all, people think about Bob Lazar like, oh, he was a crackpot, and they proved that
Mhm.
he never worked at Los Alamos, and he never went to whatever university. And sure enough, yes, he did. And George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell found, they wiped all the records of
Yep,
him having worked at Los Alamos. So, like, if you contact Los Alamos, they'll say, no, we don't have any Bob Lazar or
of
Robert
course not.
Lazar in our records. But Jeremy Corbell has a physical paper directory, phone directory
Mhm.
from Los Alamos Labs from back in the day when Bob claimed that he worked there. And sure enough, his name is on the directory. So
Right.
you can't wipe out physical pieces of
Oh, and
evidence like
people,
that.
it's like, let's face it, at that level, it's true, they could manipulate, the records, how's that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yay, yay for when stuff was on paper, right?
Yeah.
Yay,
Right. Right.
it's like your hard drive can't be erased,
Yeah.
as far as, for those people when you're a little bit older, you realize, there was once upon a time that you wrote stuff out.
Yeah, you had hard copies,
You had
and
hard
and
copies, exactly.
and backup, multiple people had hard copies, and for
Mhm.
whatever reason, they might have one stashed away in a trunk, or,
Yeah.
grandma's attic, you know?
Yes. Yes, exactly. That's what people don't realize. It's neater and you can access it faster when it's on a computer,
Yeah,
but if something ever happens to that source, good luck.
yeah.
Unless it's in the cloud, and even then it can be manipulated as in changed
Oh,
or totally erased.
it can be disappeared.
Of
Yeah, and
course.
you're right, it can be manipulated too, so that it
Mhm.
can be discredited. Anybody can do anything.
Yes, yeah, and this is the thing about that, and you know what? And, I don't know, Pat, how you feel about this. Lately we've had those hearings in Congress about UFOs and this, and to me, it's like, well, you guys, since maybe what, Roswell in 47, you've been going to great pains to discredit just about anybody that was coming
Right,
forward with stories or proof.
right.
And when you're all on board now, like, why? Why now? What happened? You know?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm kind of suspicious of it.
Yeah, I am. I am too. It's like,
Yeah,
And then,
if you're releasing the information now, how are you trying to manipulate us with it?
right, exactly. When before this, I mean, I've heard of, people that, I mean, they've been discredited if they've lost their jobs.
Right?
A lot of things have happened to whistleblowers or, people that were in the
Absolutely.
military that then afterwards they want to like come forward. And now it's like, nah. And then it turns out all these people that are in the government have been abductees or contactees. And it's like, wait a minute, why them? You
Right.
can contact thousands and thousands of people in the country, like you were talking about, that you
Mhm.
could pull them in and say, what happened to you? What's your story? And
Yeah,
talk to them, the ordinary person who has either they saw a ship, they had an encounter, they abducted,
right.
um, and but no, it's like I don't know. Let's see. I wanna wait and see how it plays out, but I guess I'm a little bit of a cynic when it comes to stuff like that.
I'm a little bit cynical too. I'm really interested in the whistleblower David Grush. He seems
Yes.
very sincere. Um,
Yeah.
but I wanna know more.
Yes.
I'm as a, uh, open-minded skeptic, I wanna see evidence,
Yeah.
but, like with Clay's story, his evidence was not convincing, and yet I still believed him because I got to know him
Right.
and his sincerity, and the emotions that
Mhm.
he felt with connected to these events. So, I have nothing. It kind of reminds me of the end of the movie Contact, where
Mm.
Jodie Foster's the scientist and Matthew
Right.
McConaughey is the religious person, and
Mhm.
he's all about faith, she's all about science, and she's she goes into that device that's supposed to send her somewhere in space that the
Right.
aliens have been communicating the plans for, and she goes through this device, and she's only she's only gone for about 15 seconds.
Right.
And yet there's like 18 hours of static on the camera.
Mhm.
And so she has had this phenomenal experience somewhere way out there in the universe or way out there in some other dimension, or we don't know. She doesn't know, but she knows it happened to her. And
Exactly.
now she's in the position of having to ask her colleagues, her scientific colleagues, and members of Congress and all the officials. She's having to ask them to take it on faith, to believe her.
Yeah.
She knows what she saw. And so I find myself feeling really more empathy for what that character,
Yeah.
what her position is, and I didn't see anything. I mean, I know people who have had like a huge ship over their head, no higher than a telephone pole, the top of a telephone pole. You can't mistake that for
Of course not.
another. You can't. Nobody can say, "Oh, they were seeing the planet Venus or the space station." You
Yeah.
can't mistake
Of course
this.
not. Of course not. You can't. It's not like
And so I'm envious of people who can say they saw something no matter what you tell them, no matter what happens, they know their truth.
and this is the thing, sometimes, as a matter of fact, sometimes when proof comes up, it's not like you were expecting it.
Right.
Sometimes things happen, you don't have a camera, you don't have anything, it just
Right.
happens,
Yeah.
enough that this is real, but a lot of these experiences are not timed like when you're ready. It's like, "Hey,"
Well,
I'm like,
and that's what happened to Clay. And
"Yeah,
people say, well, if he had so many sightings, why didn't he get pictures of them? Well, in a lot of cases, he had a camera and it was dark on dark. So he got nothing. He took
yeah,
pictures, but he didn't get anything.
yeah."
In other cases, he didn't have a camera. He didn't expect to be seeing something like
Yes,
this, and he
that's what
wasn't.
people don't realize, that things
Yeah,
happen, sometimes the timing is just
right.
it's not there, like, that you're walking around all the time
With a
with
camera.
a camera or somebody it's like
And back in the days, like in the 2010 to 2013
mhm,
period, he did not go easily into the high tech world.
right,
He was a machine kind of guy.
right,
He lived in the world of gears and machines and things like that, and he was brilliant with those kinds of things. But computers, not so much. So he just had a little flip phone. So if he took a picture with his phone, it was
mhm.
a postage stamp screen. I mean, it
Right,
was
right, and that's another thing people don't realize, like you said,
right,
even camera phones, if you had it, the
if you had
quality
it.
was really bad. It was like
Right. So in those days, it wouldn't even have occurred to him to take a picture with his phone.
yeah,
He had a digital camera, because he had to take pictures of the repairs that he did on the aircraft. And
mhm.
so it would be a matter of, is he walking around with a camera in his pocket? Well, we all do today,
Now,
but
yeah,
in those days you didn't.
no,
It
no,
was just not. Now, after a while, and this was something I've seen happen with people who experience extraordinary things. It seems like once you've had your mind opened to something unbelievable and it's real, like that ship hanging over your head,
mhm,
giant thing. Um, that's real. You know that this impossible thing is real, and so for a while after that, your mind stays open to everything. Like any impossible thing could be real, and so for a lot of people, they remain open to all kinds of possibilities. So after a while, and Clay was kind of in this phase, I believe. After a while, he started, when he had seen so many things, he started carrying cameras. He had a camera in
okay,
his bedroom on a tripod looking out toward the runway. He had a dash camera on his truck. He had he would go out with a camera at night and just
Yeah, because
snap
now at this point, he's like, "Wow."
yeah, he would snap pictures just of random spots in the dark to see if there was something there that he couldn't see with his eyes but that the camera could see. And he would go out and shoot, just go out and turn on the video of the camera and shoot some footage in the dark. And and I know that if you shoot random footage in the dark or take pictures in the dark, you're going to get visual static.
Yes,
And then once you start looking at that visual static, your brain tries to make sense of it, like looking at
of
is
course.
finding images of
Mhm.
things in clouds. There,
Yeah.
it's not really there, but
He's trying to make it like, yeah, that's a
your
face,
mind
his
is
eyes, nose.
programmed. Yeah. So that's why a lot of his evidence I was able to set aside because I explained that to him. And so he was starting to understand, okay, I realized that, one night he was telling me about this floating baboon head that he had taken a picture of.
Okay.
And one night after we had been out there interviewing him, and I debunked one of his other things, which was footage of or pictures of what he called rods or skyfish, and you
Yes.
probably know what
Yes,
I'm talking
yes.
about.
Mhm.
It looks like a flying worm with a lot of
Yeah,
wings on it.
yeah.
And I explained to him it's just an artifact from a conventional camera that the shutter speed is too slow to freeze the movement of the wings on a conventional bug. And so I showed it. I said, there's a I think it was National Geographic documentary where they filmed things. They filmed outside of a cave where it was known there were a lot of bugs, and they had
Mhm.
a high speed timer and two cameras. They had one camera that was a conventional camera, conventional speed, and another one that was high speed. And so both of them were taking pictures of the timer, the clock. And so in the normal camera, you could see one of the rods. So it looks like this worm with a lot of multiple
Right, which is those
wings on
rods that they call,
it.
yeah.
Right. But on the high speed camera, you could see that it it was moving, the frames were moving fast enough that it could capture a moth.
Right, that it's an insect. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So he had seen that and he was like, and I explained to him that we're not trying to kill your babies, basically.
Yeah.
Um, but what we want to do is we want to rule out for ourselves any evidence that other people can easily debunk because
Yes.
your real stories are so compelling, are
Mm.
so phenomenal, are so interesting that we don't want the audiences to be distracted by the things that they can say, oh, well, that's just a bug, you know. So one night after we had been out there, he sent me an email and he said, well, I think you're right. We need to debunk things before other people can debunk them. I don't want to look like a fool. And he said, so going home tonight, I took a picture that I thought of was of this baboon head. And he said it turned out to be the silverback side of the stop sign at the end of the road.
There you
And
go.
so I was real proud of him that
Yeah, yeah.
he was able to do that and he
You're
understood.
looking at it through the eyes of a skeptic to rule out, yeah, what it was, which is
Right,
great.
and he was okay with the idea that,
Uh-huh.
okay, not you know, I might have taken all this footage and all these snapshots in the dark and gotten what looks like, a picture of Mickey Mouse or, whatever kinds of things you see in clouds or a demon face. I saw
Mhm.
in actually the picture that the original picture he sent me of that baboon face, in the digital static behind it, I
Right.
saw what looked like a big eye.
Oh, crap. Alright.
And you can, and if relative to the stop sign, this thing would have been huge. This would have been the size of a Volkswagen. And so if this were really an eye, what kind of creature or demon
Right,
is
what was it
eating
the eye of?
through the and, I love it.
Oh,
It's fun to look at. It's fun to see this, but
yes,
my logical brain says it's just me trying to interpret visual noise.
exactly. Let me ask you, you mentioned something that he saw something werewolf-like or with on its hind legs.
Yeah.
When did he see that?
He actually saw, when okay, so he saw what looked like, he called it an interdimensional portal.
Okay.
So one night, it was like a rectangular area, where there is nothing,
Mhm.
on the actual, airfield. And he said it lit up, and he's got pictures of this, but I can't really tell what it is. But he said it looked like, there was a magnetic field or some kind of force. It was like pulling a blind sideways, and it opened up. And he said there were ships coming out of it. There were like aliens coming out of it. And he said there was at least one, what he called a man walking wolf. It was like a
Wow.
big wolf, but it walked on its hind legs. And he said that lasted for about an hour. And, afterwards, when it closed up again, he said, it occurred to me I should have been keeping an inventory of all the things that came out to make sure they all went back in before
You
it
know,
closed.
yeah, it's like, well, the first thing that comes to mind is you hear these stories of what they call the dogmen,
Right, right, and I've
which is
heard other
exactly
people
what that
say that.
sounds like.
Yeah, so and that does, the man walking wolf sounds a lot like the description of a dog man. Yeah,
Right, walking on 2 legs, that bipedal
right.
thing that I'd be like, "Oh, man." Let me tell you something, that scares me a lot more than Bigfoot, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, yeah, really, I mean, I feel like Bigfoot's trying to, he's trying to mind his own business.
Yeah, he's an omnivore, and he'll eat an occasional
That's
deer, but
right.
I think of a dog man as like, "Yeah, you'd like to have me for lunch."
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And it's you know what, Pat, if you have a chance, I just released an interview with this I don't know if you've ever heard of him, his name is Ronnie Dawson.
Mm-mm.
He had very similar experiences. He used to work out in the oil rigs out in Texas,
Ah, okay.
and he describes a lot of similar stuff and some way out stuff that I'll send you the link if you want to.
Yeah, yes,
But
absolutely.
it's the same thing in the middle of nowhere, Texas. He was having these experiences, and it started out, like, very similar to what was happening with this gentleman where he was seeing lights, like, you're, like, in the middle of out here, we're like, "What is that?" Not expecting he wasn't a UFO hunter, he wasn't doing any of that.
Right, right.
And, yeah, I'll send you the link, but if you maybe wanna get in touch with him because
Yeah, for
he
sure,
had
it sounds
some very
interesting.
interesting experiences, um, like one of the how can I tell you, an ordinary person that all of a sudden finds themselves in these situations
Right. Yeah,
where, "Hey, all I'm doing is I'm working out here,
yeah, not looking for it at all.
not looking," and then it
Yeah.
went to his house, same thing. It ended up at his house, and there was
Wow.
but and this is the thing, and, it's a shame that this gentleman, is no longer with us, but I have to ask you, why does his mom think that his ex-wife was a serial killer?
Uh, well, that's actually a longer story, so we'll have to save
Okay,
that.
okay, but I'm sure she must have good reason. You don't
Yeah,
I mean, you can
yeah,
dislike your daughter-in-law, but when you start thinking
yeah,
she's a serial killer, be like, "Okay."
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It has been absolutely great to speak to you, Pat. Let me ask you this, it is this are you going to keep working on this book? Or are you gonna do a sequel? How are you gonna do the
Well, we've got a team that is going to, we're gonna go out there and scan, uh, the area where, we think he buried the alien and the helmet, if there is anything. And, we may find nothing, but,
Okay,
we're gonna do our best. And so we've also got on our team, uh, investigators who are trying to track down some of the witnesses.
okay.
So some of the people who witnessed some of the things that he saw. And I've met with one, including his mom.
Mhm.
She was another witness to some of the weird stuff that happened
Okay.
out there. Um, and so we're going to have, theoretically there will be at least a documentary, if not
Okay.
a multi-part mini series or something, because we're
Mhm.
filming everything. Like I said, we've got remote viewers
Okay.
working on this. We've got an exobiologist. If we do have any biological remains or
Right.
even residue,
Mhm.
he's prepared to analyze that. Um, I've actually got a couple of implants, that one was from my brother's body and another one was from another woman who
Mhm.
dug the implant out of her. So he's going to analyze those. He's going to try to do it in a non-destructive way to
Right.
find out not only what it's made of, but trying to find out if there's any functionality to it. Does it transmit? Does it receive? Does it
Right.
control? Does it, is it emitting any kind of radio frequencies? Now,
Sure.
advanced technology wouldn't look like anything we'd recommend that we'd recognize. So, we don't know. We would be looking for
You
things
never
that
know,
we're
maybe
familiar
if
with.
they use it for tracking purposes, whatever, monitoring,
Yeah,
and then once it's done, they just leave it there. It's like, in other words, they don't come back and, "Well, we'll take it out of your body now." It's just, "Oh, okay, it's done. Whatever we
right.
were using it for, it's done."
Well, and my brother felt like he was hearing voices, and of course, if you talk to a psychiatrist or
Mhm. Yeah.
psychologist, they think that you're definitely psychotic if you
Yes.
hear voices. But he was hearing voices after he had what he believed uh, was the implantation of something.
Really.
He started hearing voices, and they were telling him to heal people. Like there was I don't know, a handicapped child that
Mhm.
he saw in church, and he heard the voice, touch the boy, and
Okay.
he's like, well, that's kind of creepy. If
Right, exactly. Yeah. That could be
I
taken a lot
can't,
of different ways, right.
yeah, I can't go around just touching kids,
Uh-huh.
and even if I am a healer, and
Mhm.
I never asked for this job in the first place. So,
Right.
so maybe are these implants just communications? Are they tracking? Are they do they give you special powers?
I'm
Do
gonna
they
tell you, I'm gonna hold on. And, and I'm gonna do this, when, you'll find that certain hypnotherapists that do spirit attachments have come across entities which they call, um, extraterrestrial.
hmm,
And I'm gonna give you, I mean, there's a doctor, hold on a minute, what's her name? Here she goes. There's several different doctors, and by the way, they've come across this, not looking for it. There's a lady,
wow.
her name is Dr. Modi. She came out with a book back in '98. It's called Remarkable Healings. A
Hmm,
psychiatrist discovers unsuspected roots of mental and physical illness. One of the things she came across, as far as the attachments, are extraterrestrials attachments.
really?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Huh.
she was writing back this in the '90s, and there's, oh my god, I can't remember his name now. Same thing, there's another gentleman, usually, it's a process. I've done it, as far as alternative hypnosis, what you come across, but she was a psychiatrist, same thing. They're not looking for that, and they stumble over it, during hypnotic
Hmm,
sessions with clients, with patients.
interesting.
Modi, Modi.
Okay.
I wanna say there's several other doctors that have written about it, but like I said, her book, it's a big, thick book. She presents a lot of case studies that you're
Hmm.
gonna find that that's part of what they come across, which are, in some cases, these extraterrestrials are just observing, they're monitoring, okay?
Okay. Yeah, that's a
And in oth
possibility.
right, they're doing is just, and it's us, and others there is more of a I don't know what's manipulation. In other words, as far as, behavior. In other
Hmm.
words, they're not just
Right.
monitoring.
Right. Right.
And part of it is that for some reason, the part of their monitoring is human feelings, how we feel. Like they in other words, that they have an absence of this or they can't quite understand it.
Right, right,
So they're trying to understand not only our behavior, but our feelings.
right,
What you think is what you feel kind of thing.
right.
But yeah, that's why I'm saying when you started describing what your brother experienced, and then this gentleman, well, I don't know, maybe her problem was from it wasn't extraterrestrial at all. Who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe it was an aggravating condition that,
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it
you know,
was. Yeah,
but yeah, that might have been part of the problem there to begin with. For my
yeah.
podcast listeners, Pat, where can they find you at?
Um, at my brother's website, experiencers.com, and that's
Mhm.
with just an X at the beginning,
No EX,
experiencers.com.
just X.
Yep, just X.
Okay.
And the book is on Amazon, Bleed
Alright.
Through, a true story of aliens, demons, and pure evil in Texas.
Okay.
And we've got ebook and paperback right now, and
Okay.
the audiobook should be out in January.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And so what are you going to do? Are you when you because it sounds like you're still researching this
Yes.
story. Would you
Yes.
come up then with a sequel as far as uh,
There will be probably at least 2 more books. One would be the book about our investigations, and then another book because the bleed through, I've fictionalized the day-to-day stuff. I mean, I kept the events that he told me about,
right,
and reported them just as he reported them, as he told me. But I uh, I created, the day-to-day situations so that I could tell it in a narrative sense instead of just saying on this day this happened, on this day
right,
that
right,
happened.
right.
That would be boring. Okay, but some people didn't appreciate the fact that there was parts of it that were fictionalized and real names, real locations were changed.
And it's
Um,
understandable why.
so for those people, another book I want to do is just a collection of Clay's um, emails to me and transcripts of his interviews. So, nothing doctored. It would be just purely his words. It would be, everything would be just as he reported it.
Okay. All right, which is great.
So,
It's
yeah.
fantastic. Believe me, this sounds like God. This is definitely there's more to the story than you could tell. There
Yeah. Oh,
definitely
yeah. There
is.
was a whole lot of information I couldn't even put in this book.
Right, exactly. Well, I will be following up with you, and I'll send you that email with that link and the links also for the
Yes.
interviews, and I'll have your a link to your website on the credits of the show, but it has been
Great.
absolutely wonderful to speak to you.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you, Marlene. Thank you so much for
On the
inviting me.
contrary, it has been my pleasure, and I'll be following up with you. We gotta talk about
Awesome.
this. This is so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye-bye. Yippee. Let me tell you. I gotta take a hold on. I gotta drink something here. Let me tell you that I think, oh man, see stuff like that goes into my head, and I think about, and I understand why she had to fictionalize the story. Absolutely, 100%. Because if not, I could see his mom, his ex-wife. I could see people running around out there trying to find the ET's body. I mean, there's so many ways that this could be like very, yeah. I could understand why she had to fictionalize it. And for those people who are like, come on, use your imagination. Hello. But yeah, and sometimes again, this is that thing that she says that they did that digging out there in that piece of land, and that then there was a sinkhole, and this was what's the word I'm looking for? Like the not the trigger event, but it sounds almost like after this was when things started getting weird. I mean, I always think I say it all the time when I was doing paranormal investigations. If it was something in the ground, a well, a cellar, a basement, God, a cave, let's not even go there. It was always, 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 it didn't fail. The phenomena was always dark, malicious, and in some cases non-human. Same thing. if you ever went to an investigation where there was a non-human entity, whether there was human and non-human or it was non-human all along, guaranteed where you would find it hiding out would be subterranean um, basements. I've even had it like if there's no basement or cellar, crawl spaces, even under the house, or you know how sometimes you'll have places where there's stairs, some type of like close to the earth kind of deal. And I know that sounds like what does one thing have to do with the other? But when you do this long enough, you see a correlation between one and the other. All right. Or for some reason in there, it's like weird. And I don't want to, I'm not saying, I'm not being hyperbolic. It was always dark stuff. It was always dark hauntings. It was always sinister stuff that is like even the reaction in your body, you know, and I've said this before, how if you fine tune yourself, you know yourself, and you know, you just keep a lid. Like in other words, you're the way your body reacts in the presence of certain things is the how can I say it? When you're in the presence of certain things that you know don't like you or hate you for whatever reason, your body reacts into this. I don't want to say fight or flight because that's a little bit extreme, but your body reacts with this of you need to get out of here. There's something here that you it's not that they're indifferent to you or they're just looking at you because you'll have people that say, "Oh, I felt I was being looked at." And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that whatever's looking at you or perceiving you, you're not welcome. It's not that you're not welcome. It's they hate you. They don't like you. And you or there's something there where you want to call it the reptile brain or subconscious, wherever the source is that's telling you you need to get out of here. And you, by the way, you would only feel that in the presence of an intelligent haunting. Residual doesn't do that. Doesn't give you that. The and I'm not even gonna say it's the willies. It's beyond the willies. It's the you need to like back away from what it is. And you know, you'll have people that will say sometimes hunters or people that have been out in the wilderness that they'll have these feelings and they leave. But in that case, you know, you might be having a wild animal that's stalking you, and your subconscious mind is feeding information to you like danger imminent, get out of here. But when you're in a house or building, there's no bear, there's no panther, there's nothing except maybe other team members, and if that much, and you're getting that same feedback telling you you need to like back up now and leave um imminent danger, and you think to yourself, well, what kind of imminent danger could there be for something that in this case would be non-physical? You know what? There's a things happen. It depends. And I spoke one time to a paranormal researcher. His name is Kyle Cobb. And his based on his experience, he said whenever I went to an investigation where the phenomena was that things were being moved, like heavy stuff, being things being thrown, or not like your little, little door here, no, like pretty heavy, that the kinetic energy that you would need to do that. He says that was my first tip off that I was dealing with something that was non-human. All right, that had a darker aspect. When we were being told that heavy objects were being thrown, or there was the movement of something that it would require a lot of force, we already knew that there was something dark. Maybe it wasn't the only thing, but that there was something dark in the mix. He's and I remember that interview with him telling me that. And yeah, and as far as that's what I'm saying, as far as the story that of what Pat was talking about, like what happened, maybe, and this is just me, maybe there was something there in that piece of land before he built the hangar, if the hangar wasn't there from before. God, it could be so many things. And unfortunately, like I was telling her, a lot of things happened that are never documented. You're lucky, and that's it. Once the last person that was there dies, that's it. It's done with. Nobody around to talk about it, especially if it was something secret, disagreeable, or unlawful, or whatever. Uh, And in some cases, the same thing. You hear of a lot of these uh, different Native American tribes who, especially, from what I understand, the skinwalkers, they won't even talk to you about it, much less are they going to write about it. So, in other words, it's difficult to go up someplace and do research like, oh, I'll look up on this book. They don't even want to talk about it. So, about the only way you're ever really going to get information about that piece of land, let's say from any of the tribes that were there, if they're still in the area, of course, it would be through word of mouth that maybe they'll, like I told her, the word got out, that place over there, that piece of land by the whatever. Yeah. Go around it. Don't go to it, like whatever. Like there's this, and they themselves, and you know what? I'm going to say it. Sometimes, and I have to give it to Native Americans, sometimes they knew or they felt or they for some reason they knew there's something that was not good for humans in that whatever, that mountain, the woods, that piece of land, that river, whatever. It was like that's not a good place. They would leave it at that. In other words, don't go there. Don't go hunting there. Don't go nothing there. Avoid it. And whatever is there, if they knew what it was, fine. But they never said, "Oh, we're gonna go find out what it is." It was like, "Don't go there." As a matter of fact, ignore it and let's not even talk about it. It's like known, like, no, don't ever go there, period. But what? Shut up. That's it. Just don't ever go there. And sometimes we miss the memo on that one. And sometimes investigations, it opens a Pandora box or puts the genie out of the bottle and good luck once it's out. You know. So again, I'm very curious when she does that follow up, what comes up if she ever gets a chance to find out what was on that land, who was there with what, if anything, you know, there's something there. Anyway, guys, I hope you like this interview. I really love speaking to Pat. Please follow up with her at her site. She's got that book, Breakthrough, and it looks like she's probably got a couple more that'll be coming out eventually. Don't forget to sign up for my Substack newsletter. You can go to MP Pellicer. You'll find links there. Again, I have links to everything, which it's the video versions of Stories of the Supernatural or the podcast version with no commercial interruptions. But I also have links if you have a certain podcast platform that you prefer. I'm all over the place. And you know, on the Substack, like I said, I put links to older interviews, podcasts, videos, news articles, weird stuff that I never put on the videos, by the way. I write articles separately and I'll do announcements also. I'm hoping now in 2024 to release my book because I've been slow walking that thing. Like, oh, you have no idea. I give myself these deadlines and it's like, phew, blow right by them because I'm so busy working on this and writing other articles. And it's like, wow, I'm not kidding you guys. By the time you hear this, will be in 2024, but it's, time flies when you're having fun. And here we are in 2024 coming at it like a speeding bullet. And I hope things will be better in 2024 because I think that's what everybody hopes. Every time the New Year's Eve comes, two things. Either you hope it's just as good or better, or you're just hoping it's please let it be better. And I think that's what everyone has in their heart, that everything will be better. And like I said, sometimes I believe that if you believe it, good things come to you. If you expect the good, if you expect the good luck, it comes to you. So that's where I'm got with that. So again, please come back next week. Thank you for being here with me. And like I said, I have a lot of interesting guests lined up to come and tell their stories. So we'll be seeing each other again soon. Till then, take care.